Okay, this is 8th grade, lesson 5.1. In this lesson, students will explore the properties of complementary and supplementary angles and use that knowledge to classify a pair of angles. The standards covered in this lesson are 8G5. The page numbers out of the hardcover book are pages 184 through 189, and out of the practice journal, pages 95 through 98. Yesterday in our activity, we worked with complementary angles and supplementary angles. So we're going to go ahead and review once again what those are. Complementary angles are a set of angles whose sum measures equal 90 degrees. Now, one thing that I do want to point out is sometimes you will be assessed on this and maybe they don't have the angle measures where they're connected together like they are in this situation. Sometimes they'll just give you a set of angles and they'll ask you to identify the sets of complementary angles. So when you check that, all you're going to do is check when you're adding to see that they equal 90 degrees. Remember, our C creates a 9, so those are those 90-degree angle measures. Anytime you see a right angle, so here we have a right angle, when it is split by a third ray, then that would be a set of complementary angles. So here angles 1 and 2 would be considered complementary angles because they create that right angle. Okay, supplementary angles, on the other hand, are going to be a set of two angles whose measures, when added together, or their sum, equals 180 degrees. And once again, my visual for that is the S that starts with supplementary creates an 8, so those equal 180 degrees. So you could have them separate like we have them here. So you could go through and check 135 plus 45 to see if they equal 180. And if they do, then they would be considered supplementary angles. The other thing that you need to understand is if they were to be put together, they would create a straight line. And you will be using this process a lot. Okay, so when they create a straight line, you have two angles that create a straight line, then they would be considered supplementary angles. So here angles 3 and 4 create that bottom straight line that's now darker blue, and they would be considered supplementary angles. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and practice some concepts with this. Okay, so here I want you to tell whether the angles are complementary, supplementary, or neither. So here's our first set. So the way that we're going to check this is we're going to check, once again, if you slide them together, does it look like it creates a straight line? If I were to be able to take that 70-degree angle and slide it right up next to the 110, does it look like it would create a straight line here? It looks like it. So then I kind of need to just double check to make sure. So I'm going to add these two together. So if I add them together, 70 plus 110 would give me 180. So which of these names is 180? Well, the C would be a 9, so that's 90. The S creates an 8, so that's my 180-degree measure. It has to equal exactly 90 or exactly 180 degrees to get one of those special names. Otherwise, it would be considered neither. So this one is exactly 180 degrees, so we would call this a set of supplementary angles. Okay, so let's go ahead and try another one. Okay, so it looks like a right angle, but we need to double check. So we need to go through and we need to add those together because it does look like it creates a right angle, but we'll go ahead and check that. So 49 plus 41, well, 40 and 40 would give me 80, and then the 9 and the 1 is 10 more. So this does equal 90 degrees, and you could check that on a calculator if you needed to. So a 90-degree angle would be called complementary. Remember, our C can create a 9. So this would be a set of complementary angles. And this last one. So once again, if I look at it, I visually am seeing something that some of you don't. So maybe if you have the angle measures, you could go through and add these two together. So 128 plus 60 would give me 188. So this is plus the 2 would be 190. Okay, remember it has to either be exactly 90, exactly 180 to get the special name, or it's, in this case, neither. Now, visually, when I looked at this, and I'm sure many of you also noticed this concept. Whoops, I moved the wrong thing. You can notice that since these were slid together, this is not a straight line. So therefore, it was already eliminated from being that supplementary angle because supplementary has to create a perfectly straight line, whereas complementary makes a perfect corner or a box in the corner. Okay, so I want you to try these three on your own. So for each of these, this one you should have gotten complementary. This one you should have gotten supplementary. And this one was darn close, but it only ended up being 89. So this would be 89 degrees. This would be considered neither. Okay, so now we're going to work a little bit of wording off of these and working with finding a missing measure. So sometimes when you are assessed, they may use some wording that maybe sounds confusing to you. So they may not say supplementary angle or complementary angle. They may use just the wording like I have here. So what is the supplement to a 43-degree angle? So the supplement would mean the supplementary angle. What would I need for that other angle to be in order for 43 to create a supplementary angle? Well, I'm going to take supplementary, which is 180, and subtract off of what I know. And yes, you may use a calculator for this if you would like to. I'm hoping you can do this subtraction, so I'm not really worried about your subtraction longhand. Okay, so if I go through and I subtract this out, I get 137 degrees. So here, 137 degrees plus my 43, if I want to just double check it, should equal out to be 180. And it does. So our answer for this question would be 137 degrees would be the supplement to 43-degree angle. Okay, so we're just going to work with some different wording. And yes, you may use your calculator to go through and check this. Okay, what is the supplement to a 28-degree angle? So remember, supplementary means 180 because that S can make an 8. So if we take 180 minus 28, well, 180 minus 30 would be 50, and I did 2 less than that, so it'd be 152 degrees. Okay. Okay, this time they use some different wording. What is the complement to a 75-degree angle? So complement would mean what angle would help create a set of complementary angles. So remember the C makes a 9, so this would be 90-degree sum. Okay, so we're just going to take 90 minus 75, and that's going to give us 15 degrees. So the complement to a 75-degree angle would be a 15-degree angle. All right, I want you to try these two. So you can go ahead and pause your video, work through these two, and then check your answers. Okay, so once again, working on those words, remembering that supplement starts with an S and you can make an 8, so that's the 180, and complement starts with a C, so it creates a 9, so it's a 90-degree angle. You should have gotten 91 and 25 on each of these. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and work off of 2 other concepts that are pretty easy to understand, and that is understanding how to work with vertical angles. So one thing that you need to understand is vertical angles actually are congruent angles, and congruent angles are 2 angles that have the same measure. So if you'll notice in this first setup, you'll see that we have 2 60-degree angles. Those would be considered congruent. And I remember congruent kind of starts with CO, just like a copy. So if I were to go copy something on the photocopy machine, it would give me the exact same thing unless I chose to enlarge or shrink it, okay? So here we've got 220-degree angles. Even though they're facing opposite directions, they're still equal in measure, okay? So vertical angles are actually going to be working with congruent angles. 2 angles are considered vertical angles if they are opposite angles are formed by an intersection of 2 lines. Vertical angles are congruent to each other. So what does that wording mean? Well, if we look at these 2 intersecting lines, the vertical angles here would be angles 1 and angle 3. Okay, and the key thing on this is understanding that that vertical angles are congruent. That means they're equal in measure. So if I knew that angle 1 was, I'll just throw a number out there, 130 degrees, then that means that angle 3 is also 130 degrees. I don't have to do any calculating. I know because they're vertical from each other, they're straight across, and they haven't been split by another ray, that they're exact measures of each other. They're copies of each other. Okay, so now I'm left with angles 2 and 4, which are also vertical angles. How can I figure out what angle 2 or 4 is? Because I'm going to have to use some sort of math. Well, here's visually what I want you to look at. If I wanted to figure out angle 2, there's a straight line, right? Remember, a straight line is a set of supplementary angles, so they equal 180. If I know that together 1 plus 2, the angle measures, not the numbers, but the angles 1 and angle 2 equal 180 degrees, and I already know 130 of it, I could subtract 180 minus 130, and that's going to leave me with 50 degrees. Okay, now I could use that same concept to solve for 4, but why not use vertical angles? Vertical angles are congruent, remember? They're equal to each other. So those are also going to be 50-degree angle measures. Okay, this will take you a long ways with working some geometry. I know that sometimes you're getting these on your STAR testing and they look so confusing when it's actually a very easy concept. Okay, if you notice here, we really only have 2 angle measures. In all 4 of those angles, there's only 50-degree angles and 130-degree angles. So understanding vertical angles is very important for this process. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and work through, some problems working with vertical angles and congruent angles. So in this first one, we're just going to solve for x. So what do we notice? Well, x is a vertical to the 70-degree angle measure. They're straight across from each other. So if I know that this is 70, then this one is congruent to that. This would also be 70 degrees. Okay, pretty easy. If I asked you to find the other one, let's just name them. Let's say this was angles 1 and angle 2. If I wanted to find out what those were, once again, I can take and split this. Think of it as a set of straight lines. So here's a straight line. And these 2 right here are making that straight line. Well, here's 70 of it. Straight line is 180. So 180 minus the 70 would give me 110 degrees. Okay, so if that's 110, this one's vertical. So this is also 110. Okay, so working those vertical angles to understand that they're equal to each other. Okay, so here we have that red box in the corner, which means a 90-degree angle measure. So if we know that that's 90 together, how can we solve for x? Well, what do we know? We know that if you need to see it visually, 50 plus x equals that box, which is 90 degrees. Now, some of you might need to see it that way, and many of you are just going to say, I'm going to take 90 minus what I know of 50 and get 40 degrees. Okay, so there's a set of complementary angles because they created that right angle or that 90-degree angle. Okay, so I want you guys to try these 3. So go ahead and pause your video, go through and solve for A, which is working supplementary angles, B, which is working vertical angles, and C, which is working complementary angles. Solve for x on each of those. Okay, so on this one, you should have gotten 95 because 180 minus 85 is 95. These are vertical angles, so I had to understand that this was a 90-degree angle, so therefore x is also 90 degrees. And here, this is a set of complementary angles, so I'm going to take 90 minus my 69 that I know, which is going to give me 21 degrees. Okay, so that's working with each of those new concepts, new wording, and understanding. Remember, the C, complementary, makes 90-degree angles. The supplementary S creates 180-degree angles. And then vertical angles are copies of each other. Those are those ones that are straight across from each other. Okay, they're straight across from the V part of an angle. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and draw something up here that I want you to go through and practice, because sometimes they give us ones that are a little more complex. So if I were to give you something that looked like this, and I'm just going to randomly put numbers in here, so bear with me on this. We may get decimal answers, and that's okay. Let's say that I had this be 130 degrees, and then I had 2x plus 7 sitting on this side. How could I go through and solve, first of all, for what that angle measure is where the 2x plus 7 is? And they probably would put this in a parenthesis just so that you understood. But ultimately, they want us to solve for x. So what you would do is you would first have to identify, well, this is a set of supplementary angles. So I'm going to take what I know, 180 degrees is supplementary, minus the 130 degrees that I know for sure. Okay, so when I do that, that leaves me with 50 degrees. Okay, so that means that this side, this angle right here, equals 50 degrees. I know that the angle is 50, but ultimately they're asking for what x is when they give us this. So now I just have to go through and solve this concept. 2x plus 7 equals 50. So we're jumping back to chapter 1 when we worked with solving 1- and 2-step equations. What would I do first? Well, I already have x's on the left side, so I want to go ahead and get rid of the non-x's. So minus 7, we get 2x equals 50 minus 7 is going to give me 43. So now I'm going to divide by 2 to get x by itself, divide by 2. So if I take 43 and divide that by 2, it's going to give me, 42 divided by 2 would be 21. So it'd be 21.5 degrees. Now, that doesn't mean that this angle is 21.5. It means the angle is 50 degrees, but when we just solved for x, it was 21.5. So I could substitute in just to check it. If I put 21.5 there, remember this means to multiply when they're right next to each other. 21.5 times 2 gives me the 43 plus 7 puts me back at 50 degrees. Okay, so here they're just combining some algebra and also those complementary, supplementary, vertical angle concepts. Okay, they're just upping the ante, trying to get you to work at a little bit higher level. So good luck with this, and just remember, supplementary angles equal 180. Complementary start with a C, they equal 90 degrees. Vertical angles are congruent or equal to each other, and they're also across the V of a set of angles. So good luck with this one, guys.